In the Baal system of Segmentum Ultima, a family of Tyranids is peacefully devouring the local population when they are brutally attacked by vampire space racists who worship an anime character. Can the Tyranids fend off this attack and return to their meal, or will they be the next victims of the Imperium of Man? Hi everyone, it's Trevor again. Today, we'll be playing a casual 1000-point game of Warhammer 40k 9th edition with my friend Brandon. So without further ado, let's meet the armies for today.
Hi, I'm Brandon, and today I'm playing Blood Angels. I'm running a patrol detachment for this game. Blood Angels are Space Marines, and we have a chapter tactic called the Red Thirst, which gives +1 to wound when a unit charges, is charged, or performs a heroic intervention, and also gives +1 to my advance and charge rolls. So in addition, Blood Angels have a super doctrine, like all Space Marines, and this is in the Assault Doctrine, and it's called Savage Echoes. So what it does is it gives an additional +1 attack when a Blood Angels unit is charged, charges, or performs a heroic intervention, in addition to the AP -1 that all Space Marines receive in Assault Doctrine. The first unit is my captain. I've upgraded him to a chapter master. He's my warlord, so I've given him a warlord trait Iron Resolve, which gives him an additional wound and a 6+ feel no pain. So in addition, I've also given him a relic, the Angel Artifice, which gives him a 2+ save and adds 1 to his wounds and toughness. He also has an ability which allows him to give full rerolls to hit for any chapter core or chapter character unit within 6 inches of him, which includes himself. And even though he's modeled with a power sword, I've given him a Thunder Hammer for this game. My other HQ choice is a Librarian Dreadnought. I've paid the points to upgrade him to a Chief Librarian, so he knows 3 spells in addition to Smite, can cast 2 of them, and has 2 denies. So the spells that I've given him are Quickening, Shield of Sanguinius, and Wings of Sanguinius. Besides his Furioso Fist and his Furioso Force Halberd, which are default on the model, I've also equipped him with a Heavy Flamer for an additional 5 points. So in addition, all Dreadnoughts have a rule called Duty Eternal, which means that anytime an attack is allocated to them, they take -1 damage to a minimum of 1 damage. So for my elite section, I'm bringing 7 Sanguinary Guard. All are equipped with Glaive and Carmine, which are basically Mastercrafter power swords, and Angela's bolt guns. So Sanguinary Guard have 2 rules. The first one is called Angelic Visage, which makes them -1 to hit when they're targeted in melee. The second rule is called Heirs of Escalon, which gives them +1 to hit whenever they're within 6 inches of a Blood Angel's Warlord. So my next elite is a Venerable Dreadnought. For this game, he has Twin Las Cannons and a Heavy Flamer, and he has a rule called Unyielding Ancient, which gives him a 6+ Feel No Pain. And like the Librarian Dreadnought, he also has Duty Eternal. So my next elites are 2 Company Veterans. I'm bringing them with Jump Packs, which makes them Legends units. This is because it's a Legends game, because Trevor's very nice to me, and he's allowing me to bring Legends units. Besides the Jump Packs, they're equipped with Lightning Claws and a Storm Shield each. So besides that, these guys also have a special rule called Command Squad, which means that when I have a captain in my army, they don't take a force organization slot. So my last elite is another character. He's a company champion who I've upgraded to a chapter champion. Because we're playing Legends, I've also upgraded my chapter champion with a jump pack, because Trevor is very, very nice to me. So in addition, I've paid 1 CP to give him a relic, the Blade of Triumph. So the Blade of Triumph is a strength +3, AP -3, damage 3 sword. And I paid another CP to give him the Warlord trait Imperium Sword, which gives him +1 to his strength and attacks when he charges, and also allows him to reroll his charges. In addition, he also has the Command Squad rule, same like the Company Veterans, which means he doesn't take a Force Orc slot when I take him with Company Veterans. So for my troop slot, I'm bringing 5 Incursors. Incursors have a rule called Forward Deployment, which allows them to deploy anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from any enemies.
Going up against Brendan's Blood Angels will be my Cannon Fodder Tyranids. I'll be running them in a High Fleet Leviathan battalion, which will give them a 6+ Feel No Pain if they're within 6 inches of a Synapse creature. Leading my forces will be my Swarm Lord, Ash Ketchum. He is a Psyker that can cast 2 powers and deny 2 powers a turn, and knows Onslaught, Paroxysm, and Smite. In addition to being a moderately scary melee character, he also has an amazing ability, Hive Commander, which he can use during his shooting phase to pick 1 friendly unit within 6 inches of him and make that unit move again. Backing him up will be my Winged Hive Tyrant, Shrek. He is a Psyker, and I've also given him the relic Resonance Barb, which gives him 3 casts and 2 denies per turn. He knows the powers Paroxysm, Psychic Scream, and Smite. For his weapons, he'll be armed with 2 Devourers with Brain Leech Worms and monstrous Rending Claws. I've given him the Adaptive Physiology, Murderous Size. This gives him +1 Strength, Damage, and Armored Penetration to his monstrous Rending Claws. For my troops, I have 10 Hormagaunts, 3 warriors with Scything Talons, and Lash Whips and Bone Swords, which let them fight even if they die. And I'll also be bringing 17 Termagants. Now, I've built some of the models with Flesh Borers and some of the models with Devourers, but for today's battle, they're all going to be armed with Flesh Borers. In my elite slot, I'm gonna be bringing my Haruspex, Cookie Monster. He regains wounds and does extra attacks every time he eats people. And when he loses a wound, on a roll of a 6, the unit that inflicted the damage gets a mortal wound. Spicy. I've spent 1 CP to also give him murderous size on his Ravenous Maw. Finally, in my heavy support slot, I have a Tyrannofex, armed with an acid spray. She gets to shoot twice if she stands still, so hopefully she'll be melting some of those pesky Blood Angels. For today's mission, we will be playing Forward Push from the GT 2021 mission pack. Our deployment zones are on opposite sides of the table, and there are 4 objectives. We'll get 5 points for holding 1 objective, 5 points for holding more than 1 objective, and 5 points for holding more objectives than our opponent. Most of the terrain on the board will be obscuring, which means it blocks line of sight, but these low barricades will be giving +1 to the armor save of any models when they stand within 3 inches of them while they are targeted by ranged weapons. We've both also picked 3 secondary objectives from the GT 2021 mission pack. Brendan has picked To the Last, Raise the Banners, and a Space Marine specific secondary objective, Oaths of Moment. I've picked Raise the Banners, Stranglehold, and Assassination. Alright, time to deploy our armies. Brendan won the roll-off for deployment, so we started deploying our units, taking turns, starting with him. His deployment ended up being fairly defensive. His Incursors decided to forward deploy behind a wall, but still in range of one of the center objectives. His Librarian Dreadnought, Company Veterans, and Chapter Master deployed behind a wall near the objective in his deployment zone. His Sangguard will be deploying behind the Incursors, and his Venerable Dreadnought and Champion will be hiding out of sight underneath this water tower. For my deployment, my Haruspex and Tyrannofex will be attempting to hide behind this rock, because I am scared to hell of that las cannon. My Swarmlord and Hive Tyrant will be hiding behind this little shed, and the rest of my little critters will be deploying in the open, ready to get shot like they always do. Alright, both our armies are deployed, it's time to roll off to see who goes first.
Go! Yes! Damn it! Yes!
Brendan's won the roll-off, so it looks like Bloody Angels are starting. In his command phase, Brendan gets 1 CP, and he decides to put his Chapter Master rerolls on his Chapter Master. Onto his movement phase, Brendan moves his Sangguard even closer to his Incursors to try to keep them out of sight. Brendan's gonna be moving his Venerable Dreadnought out of hiding to get a better angle on some of my monsters. That's not looking good. His Librarian Dreadnought, Chapter Master, and Company Veterans move forward into the wall to stay even more out of sight. Also, his Incursors raise the banner on the objective that they're holding. Moving on to the Psychic phase, his Librarian Dreadnought is gonna attempt to cast Shield of Sanguinius onto his Venerable Dreadnought. This will give him a 5+ invulnerable save, and he needs a roll of 6 for it to go off. And with a roll of 7, it goes off. I'm not close enough to deny it, so that Venerable Dreadnought is gonna get his 5+ invulnerable save. Brendan's Librarian Dreadnought doesn't have line of sight to do Smite, so we're gonna move on to the shooting phase. The Venerable Dreadnought is gonna be shooting his las cannon into my Haruspex. 2 shots, hitting on 2s. Strength 9 versus Toughness 8, wounding on 3s. The shots are AP -3, so I need 6s to save them. And of course I don't get them. D6 damage on each shot. And my Haruspex takes 7 damage, bringing him down to 6 wounds, which is painful, but at least he's alive. Brendan's got nothing in range to charge, no one else needs to fight, and no one needs to take a morale test. So we're gonna move on to Tyranids turn 1. So I get 1 command point, and in my movement phase, I'm gonna roll an advance for my Hormagaunts. I get a 6, so those Hormagaunts are gonna move up 14 inches onto that center objective. The warriors roll a 2 on their advance, so they're gonna move 8 inches behind that cat and goose cover, and the Termagants roll a 4 on their advance, so they're gonna move 10 inches up next to the warriors. The Swarmlord is gonna move up, and the Hive Tyrant is gonna move next to him. After getting shot last turn, I'm gonna move my Haruspex really behind that rock, and the Tyrannofex is just gonna budge up a few inches to her left. On to the Psychic phase. Now the Hive Tyrant doesn't have line of sight to cast Smite, but he can cast Psychic Scream, which doesn't need line of sight. He'll be targeting the nearest enemy unit, which is Brendan's Company Veterans, to try and give them some mortal wounds. Now he gets +1 from the Resonance Barb, so this is gonna go off on a roll of 4. I roll a 7, plus 1, which becomes an 8, so Brendan's gonna need a 9 to deny this. And he gets it. Next up, the Hive Tyrant will be casting Paroxysm on the Sandguard, with a warp charge of 5, so with plus 1, I'm gonna need a 4 for it to go off. I roll a 6, plus 1, which becomes a 7, so Brendan needs an 8 to deny it. And he gets it too! Bloody hell. Finally, the Swarmlord is gonna cast Onslaught on the Hive Tyrant to let him advance and charge. So I need a 6 for this to go off, and I just make it. So the Hive Tyrant can now advance and charge, which I'm gonna make use of pretty soon. In the shooting phase, I'm gonna use the Swarmlord's Hive Commander ability to yeet my Hive Tyrant at those damn dreadnoughts. I rolled a 1 on my advance, so Shrek the Hive Tyrant is gonna move 17 inches right between those dreadnoughts.
What are you doing in my swamp?
He's now in range, so he's gonna shoot his Devourers into the Sandguard. 12 shots, hitting on 3s, and that's a lot of 1s. Strength 6 against Toughness 4, so these are gonna be wounding on 3s. AP 0, so Brendan's gonna be saving on 2s. And he saves them all. Onto the charge phase, my Hive Tyrant is gonna charge that venerable dreadnought and take out that las cannon. But before that, Brendan spends 1 CP to fire Overwatch at my Hive Tyrant. 2 shots from the las cannon hitting on 6s, and no hits, and D6 shots from the Heavy Flamer.
Wow.
Strength 5 against Toughness 7, he's gonna be wounding on 5s, AP -1, so I'm gonna be saving on 4s, and I make it. Okay, back to the charge. I need a 4 to get in. And I make it on an 8. On to the fight phase, the Hive Tyrant gets 4 attacks with his Rending Claws, which will be the purple dice, and 1 attack with his Prehensile Pincer Tail, which will be the red dice. Hitting on 2s. Strength 7 against Toughness 7, so I'll be wounding all of these on 4s, and I'll be re-rolling the wounds on the Rending Claws. After the rerolls, I get 3 6s on the Rending Claws, and each 6 is an exploding hit that does flat damage of 3 and AP -6. Brendan's gonna be using his 5+ invulnerable save, and he misses all of them. Now, I actually get +1 damage on each of these attacks because of Murderous Size, but Brendan's Dreadnought has an ability that reduces damage by 1 per attack, so it's just as per normal 3 flat damage per attack, so that's 9 damage going in. So he's gonna roll 9 Feel No Pains on a 6. And he actually makes 3 of these, so the Dreadnought loses 6 wounds and is down to 2 wounds. Now he's gonna fight back. So he gets 4 attacks, plus 1 for being charged because he's a Spithmarinth. Hitting on 2s, and I love to see those rolls of 1. Strength 12 against Toughness 7, that's 3s to wound, but he gets plus 1 to wound from Red Thirst, so that's 2s to wound. And there's another roll of 1, 4+ invulnerable, and I make both of those. That's the end of my fight phase, but I really want to kill that Dreadnought, so I'm gonna spend 3 CP on the stratagem Adrenaline Surge to let my Hive Tyrant fight again. 4 attacks with the claws, 1 attack with the tail, hitting on 2s. Wounding with the claws on 4 and the tail on 5. And re-rolling all wounds on the claws. So that's 3 wounds, one of which is a 6, which is an exploding hit, so we're gonna swap that out for another color of dice, and Brendan's gonna be saving all of these on his 5+ save. So D3 damage, and that's 2 damage, 6+ Feel No Pain from Brendan, and he fails both of those. So that Dreadnought is dead, but does he explode on a 6? No, he does not. After killing the Dreadnought, Shrek is just gonna consolidate 3 inches towards this blob of guys behind the wall. Alright, so at the end of turn 1, Brendan scores 1 VP for Olds of Moment because none of his units fell back. I score 3 VP for Stranglehold because I control 3 objectives. On to Blood Angels turn 2, and Brendan moves up 1 CP. In his command phase, Brendan scores 5 victory points for controlling 1 objective with his incursors, and an extra 1 victory point because he raised the banners on that objective. He also puts his Chapter Master rerolls on his Chapter Master again. In his movement phase, he's gonna move his Sandguard and his champion closer to Shrek the Hive Tyrant. In his Psychic phase, Brendan's Librarian Dreadnought is gonna cast Quickening on himself for some extra attacks. Because he's close to the Hive Tyrant now, he's under the effect of Shadow in the Warp, so he takes -1 to cast and he needs a 7 for this to go off. He rolls a 9, -1, so that's an 8, so I'm gonna need a 9 to deny this. And I fail! D3 extra attacks on the Dreadnought, and just 1 extra attack. Next up, he's gonna smite my Hive Tyrant. It's a warp charge of 5, he takes -1, so he needs a roll of 6 for it to go off. He rolls a 7, -1, that's 6, I need a 7 to deny. And I make it! On to the shooting phase, the Dreadnought shoots his Heavy Flamer, D6 automatic hits. Strength 5 against Toughness 7, so that's wounding on 5s, and he gets 1. Save on 4s, and I make it. Next up, the Sangard are gonna shoot Shrek, 14 shots, and they're close to their Warlord, so they hit on 2s, and they also reroll 1s. Strength 4 against Toughness 7, so wounding on 5s. Invulnerable save of 4, and I miss 2, but I have a 6+ Feel No Pain, and I make 1, so he goes down to 11 wounds. Next up, the Chapter Master is gonna shoot his Infernal Pistol at the Hive Tyrant, hitting on 2s and re-rolling 1s. Strength 8 against Toughness 7, so that's wounding on 3s. And Invulnerable save of 4, and I make it. And the Champion's gonna shoot his Bolt Pistol, which is hitting on a 3.
Okay.
Alright. Next up, Brandon actually remembered to get his company veterans to throw their crack grenade, hitting on 3s and re-rolling all hits. Strength 6 against Toughness 7, wounding on 5s. AP -1, so I save on a 4. And that's D3 damage. 6+ Feel No Pain, and I don't make it, so the Hive Tyrant takes 1 more damage. That takes him down to 10 wounds. In the charge phase, Brendan's gonna roll the charge on the Sangard just to see how far they can pile in. He rolls an 8, +1 for Red Thirst, so that's a 9, and all the Sangard are gonna jump in. Brendan's Dreadnought, Champion, and Chapter Master are all gonna charge as well, but because they're so close, I'm just gonna give it to Brendan, and we'll say that all of them automatically succeed their charge and they're all in the fight. This might be where I say goodbye to Shrek the Hive Tyrant. The Sangard are gonna fight first. Each of them have 3 attacks, and each of them gets an additional attack because they charged. So that's a total of 28 attacks, which we're gonna resolve 14 at a time. So, hitting on 2s, and re-rolling 1s. They get +1 to wound because of Red Thirst, so they're gonna be wounding on 4s. AP -3, saving on 4s. I missed 2, so that's 4 damage going in, and we're gonna roll 4 6+ Feel No Pains. I make 1, so he takes 3 damage, bringing him down to 7 wounds. Second batch of 14 attacks, hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s. Wound on 4s. I'm gonna save these on a 4. Failed 3, so that's 6 damage. I'm gonna roll my 6+ Feel No Pains. I make just 1, so he's lost 5 wounds and he's now down to 2 wounds. Next up, Brendan's Champion is gonna fight, so he has 5 attacks base, he gets +1 because he charged, and he gets +1 again because of his ability, the Imperium Sword. So that's 7 attacks total, hitting on 2s. Strength 8 against Toughness 7, so that's 3s to wound, +1 to wound because he charged, so that's 2s to wound, and he rerolls all his wound rolls. 4+ Invulnerable save, and I make none of those. Each of those is 3 damage, and there's no way I'm gonna be able to roll all those 6s on my Feel No Pains, so we're just gonna say that Shrek the Hive Tyrant is dead. Tyranid monsters don't physically explode when they die, but they have a rule called Death Throws which is identical, so we're just gonna call it an explosion, which goes off on a 6. Nope, goodbye Shrek. You did real good though. Brandon scores 1 victory point for killing the Hive Tyrant as part of Oaths of Moment. Alright, no morale tests need to be taken, so that's the end of turn 2 for Blood Angels. On to turn 2 for Tyranids. So I get 1 CP, and because I hold more than one objective, I score 10 victory points. In my movement phase, my Homagons are gonna move 8 inches up towards that Dreadnought. Next up, the Termagants advance. With a roll of 3, they move 9 inches towards the right objective, but they're still not quite in range to capture it. Next up, the Swarmlord will move 9 inches forward, and the Haruspex is gonna move 7 inches around that rock next to the Swarmlord. On to the Psychic phase, the Swarmlord is going to cast Smite on the nearest visible enemy unit, which is the Sanguinary Guard. Warp Charge 5. And Brendan needs an 11 to deny that. And he fails, so that's D3 mortal wounds on the Sanguinary Guard. 2 mortal wounds, and that's 1 dead guy. Next, the Swarmlord is going to cast Paroxysm on the Sang Guard. If this goes off, then they fight last until my next Psychic phase. This goes off on a 5. Brendan needs a 7 to deny. And he fails it, so this goes off and the Sang Guard fight last. On to the shooting phase, the Termagants are going to shoot 17 shots at the Sanguinary Guard. The Sang Guard are -1 to hit, so I'm going to be hitting on 5s. Strength 4 against Toughness 4, so wounding on 4s. AP 0, so Brendan's going to be saving on 2s. And he makes both of them, so that's no damage. Finally, the Swarmlord is going to use Hive Commander to yeet that Haruspex closer to the Incursors. In the charge phase, the Homagons are going to charge the Dreadnought, but Brendan uses 1 CP to fire Overwatch on them. D6 automatic hits from the Heavy Flamer.
Whoa! That's not good.
Strength 5 against Toughness 3, wounding on 3s. And it's AP -1, so I don't get any saves, and 5 Homagons die. Alright, so I need a 4 to get in on the charge, and I make it with a 9. And just for funsies, Brendan's captain is gonna heroically intervene into the Homagons. And now the Haruspex is gonna charge, he needs a 6 to get in, and I make it on a 7.
Cookie!
On to the fight phase, because the captain heroically intervened into those Homagons, they can fight him now, so they're gonna do so, and they're gonna attack with 2 attacks per model for a total of 10 attacks, hitting on 4s, rerolling 1s. Strength 3 against Toughness 5, wounding on 5s. AP 0, so he's gonna be saving on 2s. And not a wound in sight. On to the Haruspex, I'm going to use 1 CP for Feeding the Hunger, which allows me to reroll his hit roll, and 1 CP for Voracious Appetite, which allows me to reroll his wound roll. 4d3 attacks with his mouth, so that's 6 hits, hitting on 4s, rerolling all hits. Strength 7 against Toughness 4, wounding on 3s, rerolling all wounds. Three wounds at AP -2, so Brendan is saving on 5s. He makes 1, so that's 2 dead Incursors. So for every model I kill, I get an extra attack with the Haruspex's Shoveling Claws, so that's 2 extra attacks, hitting on 4s. Let's reroll those hits. So never mind about that, the Haruspex has killed 2 Incursors, and because he did, he regains 1 wound, bringing him back up to 7 wounds. So now the Dreadnought is going to fight against the Homagons, 4 attacks plus 1 for being charged, so that's 5 attacks hitting on 3s. Rerolling all hit rolls. Strength 8 against Toughness 3, so that's wounding on 2s. AP -2, so I get no saves, and that's 5 dead Homagons. Now, I knew they weren't gonna do any damage, but I was kind of hoping that they'd tie up the Dreadnought for longer, so that's kinda sad. Next up, the Incursors are gonna fight back against the Haruspex. After adding all their extra attacks, they get 10 attacks total, hitting on 3s. Wounding on 6s and +1 to wound, so wounding on 5s. AP -1, so I'm saving on 4s, and I save both of those. Now, Brendan's Incursors lost 2 models and they have a leadership of 8, so for any of them to fail the morale test, he would need to roll a 7, which is not possible. So we're gonna end my turn there and we're gonna move on to Blood Angels turn 3. In his command phase, Brendan gets 1 CP and he gives his Chapter Master rerolls. He also scores 10 victory points for controlling 1 objective with his Incursors and 1 objective with his Vanguard. And he also gets 1 more victory point for that banner that he raised previously. In his movement phase, his Sang Guard and his Champion are gonna jump on that forward objective. His company veterans are gonna jump out in front of the Swarmlord and the Termagants. His Chapter Master is gonna fly over to the Haruspex. His Dreadnought is gonna waddle 6 inches towards the Haruspex as well, and his Incursors are gonna fall back, cause they can't take the heat. In his Psychic phase, the Dreadnought is gonna try and cast Wings of Sanguinius so he can fly over to the Haruspex and punch him in the face. He's at -1 to cast, so he's gonna need a roll of 7 to pull this off. With a roll of 7, he pulls it off, and I'm gonna need a 7 to deny this. And I deny it, thank God. Next, he's gonna try and smite the closest visible enemy unit, which is the Termagants. -1 to cast, so he needs a 6 for this to go off. And he doesn't get it. Onto the shooting phase, the Chapter Master is gonna shoot his Inferno Pistol at the Haruspex. Hit on 2s, rerolling 1s. Strength 8 against Toughness 8, wounding on 4s. So that's AP of -4, so I don't get any saves. D6 damage, Brendan rolled a 3s, the Haruspex is down to 4 wounds. Next up, the company veterans are gonna throw a frag grenade at my Termagants. This is a blast weapon and my Termagants unit is very large, so they're gonna be taking the max number of shots, which is 6. So that's 6 shots hitting on 3s, wounding on 4s. It's AP 0, so I still get saves on a 6. And I actually make one, so that's only 1 dead Termagant. Next, the Sangard are gonna shoot the Termagants, hitting on 3s. Strength 4 against Toughness 3, wounding on 3s. They're AP -1, so I don't get any saves, but because I'm close to the Swarmlord, I get 6+ feel no pain. And I make one, so that's 5 dead Termagants. The Dreadnought is gonna shoot his Heavy Flamer at the Termagants. D6 automatic hits. Strength 5 against Toughness 3, wounding on 3s. AP -1, so I don't get any saves, but I get my 6+ feel no pains. And nothing, so that's 4 of my guys dead. Finally, the champion shoots his Bolt Pistol at the Termagants, hitting on 3. Strength 4 against Toughness 3, wounding on 3s, but no luck today. In the charge phase, the Chapter Master is gonna charge the Haruspex. He needs a roll of 4 to get in. And he's in! Next up, the Dreadnought is gonna charge the Haruspex. He needs a roll of 9 to get in. He doesn't make it, but Brendan's gonna use 1 command point to reroll that. And still nothing.
Brother, I am pinned here!
The company veterans are gonna charge the Swarmlord. They need a 5 to get in. And they make it.
They need to be brave for what's about to happen.
And the Sangard are gonna charge the Termagants. And they make it.
I'm in danger!
Onto the fight phase, the Chapter Master is gonna punch that Haruspex. 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, re-rolling all hits. Strength 8 against Toughness 8 and +1 to wound, so wounding on 3s. AP -2, so I save on 5s. I make 3, so that's 1 attack going through with 3 damage, bringing the Haruspex down to 1 wound. Now the Haruspex has acid blood, so every time he loses a wound, we roll a dice, and on a 6, the attacking model takes 1 mortal wound. So that's 1 6, but Brendan's Chapter Master gets a feel no pain on a 6. And amazingly, he gets it. Next, the company veterans fight the Swarmlord. 9 attacks, hitting on 3s. Strength 4 against Toughness 7, but +1 to wound, so these will be wounding on 4s, and Brendan will be rerolling all his wound rolls. The Swarmlord gets +1 to his invulnerable save while he's in melee combat, so he'll be saving on 3s. So that's 1 wound, and I'm gonna roll my 6+ feel no pain. And I make it, so that's no damage on the Swarmlord. Now, even though the Sangard charged, they're still suffering from the effects of paroxysm, so they fight last, which means that the Termagants are gonna fight first. 6 Termagants are in engagement range, so that's 6 attacks, -1 to hit, so hitting on 5s. Strength 3 against Toughness 4, wounding on 5s. AP 0, so Brendan is saving on 2s. And he rolls a 1, so the Termagants actually do a wound to the Sanguinary Guard. Next up, the Swarmlord is gonna fight back against those company veterans. He gets 6 attacks with his Bone Sabers and 1 attack with his tail, hitting on 2s. Strength 8 against Toughness 4, wounding on 2s. Also, any wound roll of 6 on the bone sabers causes an extra mortal wound. So that's 1 extra mortal wound, and the sabers are AP -3 while the tail is AP 0. So Brendan will be using his 2+ armor save for the tail and his 4+ invulnerable save for the sabers. He fails 3 of the sabers, so that's 3 damage each, plus 1 extra mortal wound, which makes it 10 damage, and that means those 2 very brave company veterans are dead. Next, the Haruspex is gonna fight, and I'm gonna spend 2 CP so that he can reroll his hit roll and his wound roll. 4d3 attacks, and I get 8 attacks. He's down a wound track, so he'll be hitting on 5s, but I'll be rerolling all my hit rolls.
Oh my god! All hits without the reroll. That was crazy.
That's mad.
But it turns out I didn't need to reroll anything because I just had the best roll of my entire life. Strength 6 against Toughness 4, wounding on 3s and rerolling all wounds. AP of -2, so Brendan will be saving on 4s. He's failed 3 of these and each one is D3 damage plus 1 for murderous size. So that's 7 damage plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, which makes it 10 damage, so Brendan's gonna roll 10 6+ feel no pains. He only makes 2, so that chapter master is dead. Also, the Haruspex regains 1 wound for eating him, so that moves the Haruspex back up to 2 wounds. The chapter master was also a character, so by eating him, I've scored 3 VP under assassination. Next up, the Sangard are gonna fight the Termagants. They have 24 attacks total, which we're gonna resolve 12 at a time, hitting on 3s. Wounding on 2s. These attacks have AP, so I don't get any saves, but I get my 6+ feel no pain. Each attack is 2 damage, so I'm rolling 6 of these. And I make 1, so that's 5 damage total, but spread out over 3 attacks, so 3 Termagants die. On to the second batch of 12, hitting on 3s. Wounding on 2s. So that's 7 attacks going through, which makes it 14 feel no pains that I have to roll on a 6. I'm actually not gonna bother to roll that, so we're just gonna say that all the Termagants that were in engagement range are gonna die, so that's 6 dead Termagants. At the end of the fight phase, the Sangard are gonna consolidate into the Termagants, and the Haruspex is gonna consolidate into the Incursors. On to Tyranids turn 3, and I get 1 extra command point, so I control more than 1 objective, and I control more objectives than Brendan, so I score 15 victory points. In my movement phase, the Termagants are gonna fall back from those scary Sangard and move onto the rightmost objective. And because I now control the objective, the banner that Brendan raised previously on it has been broken. Which reminds me, I've actually been forgetting to raise the banners on my objectives every single turn so far. God damn it. The Tyranids, which has been chilling at the back and looking vaguely scary, is just gonna move slightly forward so that it's in range to shoot at those Sangard. And finally, the Swarmlord is gonna move up closer to that Librarian Dreadnought. In my Psychic phase, the Swarmlord is gonna cast Smite on the Sangard. But I roll a Perils. Now, I don't want to eat those mortal wounds, so I'm gonna spend 1 command point to reroll that.
That is ridiculous.
So the Swarmlord takes D3 mortal wounds. So that's 2 mortal wounds, and I get a 6+ feel no pain. And of course, I make neither of those, so the Swarmlord is down to 10 wounds. Good job, you bloody idiot. Next, the Swarmlord casts Paroxysm on the Librarian Dreadnought, and this goes off on a 5. Because the Swarmlord is now within 12 inches of the Dreadnought gets +1 to deny, so he's going to be denying on an 11. But he doesn't get it, which means that the Dreadnought will be fighting last until my next Psychic phase. On to the shooting phase, the Tyranids is going to shoot at the Sangard. 2d6 automatic hits from the acid spray. So that's 9 hits, strength 7 against toughness 4, wounding on 3s. So these are AP -1, but those Sangard happen to be standing within 3 inches of one of those barricades, so they get +1 to their armor save and they're still going to be saving on 2s. So they fail 3 and each one is D3 damage. Alright, that's 6 damage, and after some wound allocation, 2 Sangard are dead and 1 guy goes down to 1 wound. The Tyranids has a second weapon, the Stinger Salvo, which has 4 shots hitting on 4s. Strength 5 against Toughness 4, wounding on 3s. And no wounds. The Swarm Lord is now going to use Hive Commander to move himself slightly closer to the Dreadnought just so that he gets a guaranteed charge. On to the charge phase. In the fight phase, the Swarm Lord gets 6 attacks with his Bone Sabers and 1 attack with his tail, hitting on 2s. Strength 8 against Toughness 7, wounding on 3s. So Brendan's going to be saving the wound from the tail on a 3 and the wound from the saber on a 6. He failed the wound from the saber, so that's 3 flat damage, but the Dreadnought has an ability that reduces incoming damage by 1, so that's 2 damage going through to the Dreadnought. Next up, the Incursors are going to fight the Haruspecs, 7 attacks, hitting on 3s. Strength 4 against Toughness 8, wounding on 6s. AP minus 2 because of the Assault Doctrine, so I'm saving on 5s. And I didn't make it, but the Haruspecs is within 6 inches of the Swarm Lord, so I get my 6+, feel no pain. And I make it! Now the Haruspecs fights back, 4 D3 attacks with his mouth, 7 attacks hitting on 5s, and wounding on 3s. Brendan's gonna be saving on 5s, and he fails it. It's D3 damage plus 1, and the Incursors only have 2 wounds each, so no matter what I roll, that is 1 dead Incursor. I get an extra attack for eating that Incursor from the Shoveling Claws, but I miss it. And also because he ate the Incursor, he regains 1 more wound, bringing him back up to 3 wounds. Next up, the Dreadnought is gonna fight back. After adding all his extra attacks for the various Space Marine rules, he gets 7 attacks with his Furioso Fist and 1 attack with his Halberd, hitting on 3s. All those hits are wounding on 3s. And I roll a 3+ invulnerable save, and I make 2. That's 3 damage, so I roll 3 6+, feel no pains. I fail all of them, so the Swarm Lord takes 3 damage. So he's now down to 7 wounds. Alright, that's the end of my turn, and I still control 3 objectives with my Tyrannofex, Termagants, and Tyranid Warriors, so that means I score 3 victory points for Stranglehold. At the end of the battle round, Brendan also scores an additional 2 victory points for Oaths of Moment because he has 1 unit, his Sanguinary Guard, that is within 6 inches from the center. At this point, Brendan and I are still both pretty sure that maybe we could do it, so we're gonna keep playing. On to Blood Angels turn 4. In his command phase, Brendan gains 1 command point. On to the movement phase, the Sangard are gonna jump over to the Tyranid Warriors. His champion is gonna move over right next to the Swarm Lord. Next up, in the Psychic phase, Brendan's Dreadnought is gonna cast Smite on the Swarm Lord. -1 to cast because of Shadow in the Warp, so he needs a 6 for this to go off. And he gets it! I need a 6 to deny it. But sadly, I don't get it, so that's D3 mortal wounds. So that's 2 mortal wounds, and I get a 6+ feel no pain.
Ridiculous! Double 6, yes!
Okay.
Next up, he's gonna cast Shield of Sanguinius on himself. He's gonna need a 7 for this to go off. And he gets it. I need an 8 to deny. And I don't get to deny it, so that Dreadnought is gonna have a 5+ invulnerable save. On to the shooting phase, the Incursors are gonna shoot their bolt pistols at the Haruspecs. 2 shots hitting on 3s. Strength 4 against Toughness 8, wounding on 6s. So that's no wounds. Next up, even though the Sangard are standing next to the Warriors, they're gonna shoot at the Gaunts. 8 shots hitting on 3s. Wounding on 3s. AP -1, so I don't get any saves, and I'm too far away for the feel no pains from the Swarm Lord, so those Gaunts are dead. Next up, the Dreadnought shoots his Flamer at the Swarm Lord, D6 automatic hits. 5 hits, wounding on 5s. I get a 4+ invulnerable save, which I fail, but I also get a 6+ feel no pain, which I make, so that's no damage. In the charge phase, the Sangard charge the Warriors and the Champion charges the Swarm Lord. Now they're all so close, so we're just gonna say that they make it in. The Champion attacks, 8 attacks, hitting on 2s. Brendan's gonna spend 1 CP to reroll one of those 1s. So it's a strength of 8 against toughness 7, so Brendan's gonna be wounding on 3s. +1 to wound, so he's wounding on 2s, and he's gonna be re-rolling all those failed wounds. I'll be using my invulnerable save of 3, and I save all of them. Next up, the Sangard are gonna attack the warriors, 20 attacks, hitting on 3s. Strength 5 against toughness 4 and +1 to wound, so they're gonna be wounding on 2s. AP -3 because of the assault doctrine, so there's no saves, and that means that there's 20 damage going through. The warriors have synapse, so I do get feel no pains, but there's no way I'm gonna roll that many 6s, so we're just gonna say that the warriors are dead. But because of their lash whips and bone swords, they fight on death. 9 attacks, hitting on 3s but -1 to hit, so hitting on 4s. Strength 4 against toughness 4, wounding on 4s. And that's no wounds. Well, it was worth a shot. Next up, the Swarmlord is gonna fight the Dreadnought. 6 attacks with the sabers and 1 attack with the tail, hitting on 2s. Strength 8 against toughness 7, so wounding on 3s. So Brendan saves the tail on a 3, no save, and he saves the sabers using his 5+ invulnerable save. So those 2 that he didn't save are flat 3 damage, and I'm gonna roll the D3 damage on the tail. And after the Dreadnought minuses all the damage due to his abilities, he loses 5 wounds total, bringing him down to his last wound. After that, the Incursors and the Haruspecs fight each other, but I'm gonna save you some time and let you know that after they fought, neither of them did any wounds to the other, so we're gonna skip that for now. Finally, the Dreadnought is gonna fight the Swarmlord, so he gets 4 attacks with his fists and 1 attack with his halberd, which hit on 3s. Wounding on 3s, and I'll be using my invulnerable save of a 3.
All no saves.
Almost saves. That's a lot of damage.
That is a lot of damage.
So that's not looking so good. D3 plus 3 damage on the halberd, and 6 damage total for the fists. So that's 12 wounds going through. Let's roll my 6+ feel no pain. So I make 2 of those, but I take 10 wounds, which means the Swarmlord is dead. Does he explode on a 6? No, he doesn't. So that's not looking very good for me. For killing the Swarmlord, Brendan gets 1 VP under Oaths of Moment. Alright, let's move on to Tyranids turn 4. In my command phase, I get 1 command point, and I only hold 1 objective, but because I also hold more than Brendan, I get 10 victory points. Straight into the shooting phase, and my Tyrannofex is gonna shoot at the Sangard. Now because she didn't move this turn, she gets to fire all her weapons twice, so that's 4d6 automatic hits from the acid spray. So that's 14 shots, wounding on 3s. AP -1, so the Sangard are gonna be saving on 3s. So Brendan fails 2, and that's D3 damage on each one. And after some wound allocation, 1 Sanguinary Guard dies. Next, we're gonna shoot the Stinger Salvo, 8 hits, hitting on 4s. Wounding on 3s. And Brendan's gonna be saving those on 2s. And he saves them both. And Brendan actually reminded me, my Haruspecs can actually shoot something. His tongue. 1 shot, hitting on a 5. And strength 5 against toughness 4, wounding on a 3. And crazily enough, it's AP -3, so Brendan is saving on a 6. And he fails it. D3 damage. And that's 2 damage. And I've actually killed an Incursor with that. That is amazing. And I even get a wound back for killing him with it. No one's gonna charge, so on to the fight phase. The Incursor, as the defending unit, is gonna fight the Haruspecs first. 3 attacks, hitting on 3s. And wounding on 6. So that's no wounds, so the Haruspecs is gonna fight back. I'm gonna go ahead and use up my 1 command point to give him full rerolls to hit. 4d3 attacks. 7 attacks, and because he regained a wound, he actually moves up a bracket and he hits on 4s now, rerolling all hits. And wounding on 3s. AP of -2, so Brendan is saving on 5s. He fails all of them, so I don't even need to roll the damage for it. The Incursor is definitely dead. And the Haruspecs regains 1 wound to move to 5 wounds. So that's the end of my turn and the end of the battle round. Brendan scores 1 additional victory point for Oaths of Moment because none of his units fell back during this round. So now it's turn 4 and I have a significant lead of victory points on Brendan. Brendan also doesn't control any objectives at the start of his turn, so he can't score any more victory points from his primaries. We did some calculation and basically Brendan has to kill both my Haruspecs and my Terran effects for him to win this game. If not, I will win based on victory points. So let's see how it goes in Blood Angels turn 5. So Brendan gets 1 CP, and in the movement phase he's gonna move both his champion and his Sangguard closer to my Terran effects. And his Dreadnought is gonna move towards my Haruspecs. In the psychic phase, the Dreadnought casts Quickening on himself. He needs a 6 for this to go off. And he gets it, so that's D3 extra attacks. So that's 2 extra attacks. And now he's gonna try and smite, he needs a 5, but he fails it. In the shooting phase, he shoots his Heavy Flamer at the Haruspecs, D6 automatic hits. 5 hits, strength 5 against toughness 8, wounding on 5s. AP -1, so I'm saving on 4s. And I save both of them. Maybe I can still do this. The Sangguard shoot at the Tyrant effects, 6 shots hitting on 3s. Strength 4 against toughness 8, wounding on 6s. And no wounds. And now the bolt pistol from the champion hitting on 3s. And wounding on 6s. Nope. In the charge phase, the Dreadnought and the Sangguard charge and they're automatically in because they're so close. So now we're gonna roll the charge on the champion. He needs a 7 to get in. And he rolls an 11, so he's in. So after adding all his attacks, the Dreadnought has 7 attacks with his fists and 1 attack with his halberd, hitting on 3s. He'll be wounding on 3s with the halberd and on 2s with the fists. That's AP -4 because of the assault doctrine, so I don't have any saves, which means that the Haruspecs is dead. Does he explode on a 6? No he doesn't, so goodbye Cookie Monster. Alright, it's all down to the Tyrant effects. Can you stay alive? The champion fights, 8 attacks, hitting on 2s. Brendan's missed 1, so he's gonna spend 1 CP to reroll that. Strength of 8 against toughness 8, +1 to wound, so he's wounding on 3s. Those are AP -4, so I don't have any saves, and each of those is 3 damage, so that means the Tyrannofex is dead. And with that, Brendan wins! So what a crazy game. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like, and if you want to see more content like this, please subscribe because we're thinking of doing more battle reports in future. Thanks so much to Brendan for playing with me and agreeing to be featured on the channel. And thank you also to my beautiful girlfriend Karl for helping us out with the filming, because without you, we couldn't have done this. Also, if you enjoyed the format of this battle report, I took heavy inspiration from the battle reports on these 2 channels, Midwinter Minis and Play on Tabletop. So if you'd like to see similar types of battle reports, but with better production value, you can go and check them out. Hope you enjoyed watching, and I'll see you all next time.